to the Bay Area right in the middle of COVID around 2021 from the East Coast. I lived in DC for about 11 years, and then I got an opportunity to move into tech in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
What everybody comes here for.
Yeah.
The property that we had, the rental property wasn't great, and we wanted to get out of it quickly. So we thought if we're gonna move again, let's just look for a place instead of looking for another rental place. Yeah, budget was a big factor. It also had to be close enough to the office that I was gonna spend some time in. So not too far away from, the Bay.
The people that are the luckiest are the ones that take action.
Yeah.
That's the reality of life too. But it's good for people to kind of see and understand, moving from another area, right? Like in your case, the faster it was to turn around, the better it ultimately was to not have to be in that rent column and have to deal with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to this conversation. I think a lot of people, I created this series because I want a lot more people to learn about everybody's different journey. Like everybody starts somewhere, everybody comes to a realization at different points. Mm-hmm. So I love for people to learn a little bit more about yourself, as in, when did you actually come to the Bay Area and where did you come from before? So give us a little bit of the history, and then we'll talk about your decision to ultimately try to find a place.
Yeah. So I moved to the Bay Area right in the middle of COVID around 2021 from the East Coast. I lived in DC for about 10, 11 years, and then came here for a new job opportunity.
Okay. And then what was that job opportunity? Was it, and what was the reasons for it? Was it a career? Was it a promotion? Was it much better pay? Was it different industries? What were you doing out in DC versus here?
Yeah, no, I was in the consulting side in DC, and then I got an opportunity to move into tech.
Okay.
In the Bay Area, which is I guess is
yeah,
what everybody comes here for.
Yeah.
So it was more of it was not like a promotion. I think it was more like a career choice.
Okay.
I decided that I wanted to do something different in my life, and
yeah,
decided to try out tech.
Interesting. And let me ask, because it wasn't a promotion, but it's always good for people to know, comp-wise in general, percentage-wise, was it similar? Was it much different? Walk us through a little bit about from that at that point.
I mean, it was more money from from a salary standpoint.
Okay.
But if you take into account cost of living and stuff, I think it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Okay, got it. And what is it? Because DC is not cheap either.
Yes.
Right. So when you first moved here, you rented.
Mm-hmm.
What was the cost difference from a renting perspective from there to here? How much percent was it higher, or is it not that far apart?
I think I would say at least about $500 to $1,000 more for the same size apartment.
Okay.
Over here.
Okay.
Compared to DC.
Okay.
Yeah, for renting. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you were here, so you moved in 2020, right?
2021, yeah.
2021. And you moved here for a bit. This was your first time in the Bay, living in the Bay, at least, right? Living in the Bay. And so when was the consideration, what prompted consideration to even thinking about buying a place? What was the logic there?
I mean, the goal was always to buy a place eventually. We thought we would rent for a while and then move, and then buy a place. But the rental property, it's kind of fluke. And the property that we had, the rental property wasn't great, and we wanted to get out of it quickly. So we thought if we're gonna move again, let's just look for a place instead of looking for another rental place.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so how did you decide? What was the theory or the thought process of which areas you looked, and decide between a condo, townhome, single family type relative to the budget? How was that decision making process?
Yeah, budget was a big factor.
Yep.
It also had to be close enough to the office that I was gonna spend some time in, so not too far away from the Bay. Had to be close to the Bay. That was a big factor. And then also looked at schools. Have a daughter. That was important. Obviously, the budget played a role. I wanted a property where I had some backyard space as well.
Yep. Okay.
So apartments were lower on the priority, but those are the kind of things going into the discussion. And my wife did not want to move year over year to a new rental property.
I think that's very important, right? So a big part of it is the stability.
Yeah.
Right? People want, and time goes by quickly. Right? Walk us through what month and year did you buy this place as an example?
So I bought this, I think 2021 September. Yeah, September.
And by the time of this recording, it's 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
And it's fast.
Yeah.
Like time goes by super fast, and that's one of the things when people have the decision to decide to buy or rent, you're going to be moving anyways,
Hmm.
regardless. At least in your case,
Yeah,
right? Like you're going to move out, you're going to move something,
something. Yeah.
but then the question always comes down to be like, okay, if you were to rent, you would have fulfilled the need to rent for that time period. And then 9 months later, 10 months later, you may have to go through the same
Same
thing
problem.
again. And then you got to go through the hassles of moving again. Right. Versus in this case, you made a decision to own. Obviously, that's a little bit more of a long term. But at the same time, like time goes by really quickly. And I think that's what a lot of people do fail to kind of see, right? It's really like renting is a quote month to month thing,
Hmm.
but like most people stay in the Bay Area for a long time once they are here, especially if they work in the industries that are here, and because of that, then they kind of underestimate how long
Yeah.
they will be here, right? And so, um, how did you decide then? Because you know you wanted a little bit of a yard. How far out were you willing to go? Like, what was your thought process at that point? Like, how far were you willing to go?
Yeah, so it had to be, I think, like 30 minutes, around 30 to 30, 40 minutes drive from my office.
And where's the office?
The
Yeah,
office is in Menlo Park.
right.
So Menlo, and then I go to Sunnyvale sometimes.
Yeah,
So it had to be, we were willing to compromise a little bit. But the I think, again, we didn't need like a lot of, we didn't have a lot of requirements. We just wanted a little bit space. It was just the three of us, me, my wife, and my daughter, and my parents come visit sometimes, so we needed a
yep,
spare room as well,
yep.
to have that flexibility. So I think, we didn't need to be, like Palo Alto,
Mm.
Menlo. That was, but the budget didn't allow us to go there.
I mean, you could. It would just be a
Yeah,
one
yeah,
bedroom,
yeah. We just
one
got a
bedroom
one
condo.
bedroom,
Yeah,
right?
a one
So
bedroom
we
condo.
needed
Yeah,
a little bit of space.
yeah,
So we're willing to move down,
yeah.
further away. But
And that's the decision that everybody will make themselves, right? Like
yeah,
you have a budget. The main thing is going to be the budget, and then it's going to be the preference of well, how far of commute are you open to, and what is important. Like if you want a yard, really, if you think about it, only the older ones, I say older, like pre 90s
mm,
townhomes, will have a yard. Anything that's after that is going to be more vertical. So you're going to have more stairs for sure. It's going to be at least a 3 stories,
mm,
and they may not even have a yard. They may have a balcony because that's what they kind of substituted down the road. And but if you wanted a yard, it's going to be the original, a little bit more older and original ones. The catch is not all areas actually have this kind of setup that you have here,
okay,
right? And so it's really important for a lot of people to when they go through the journey just to do that and understanding. Like, okay, not only you have a budget, you have the locations, but is that product type exist? Does it even exist?
mm-hmm,
Some cities actually even along your path. Let's say you have to commute to Menlo Park or Sunnyvale. Some of those areas along the path straight up don't even have this type of product, right? Because
right,
back then it just wasn't that the developer never built this kind of layout,
mm-hmm,
right? And so that's also the disconnect and understanding that people have had to have. So outside of just the decision to rent or at least get out of renting and the stability side of things, like what do you think are your plans? Do you have any other plans down the road? Like, is your one of your objectives to just stay like this, keep saving money, and then this is good for a long time? Or do you have goals, like maybe down the road, single family? Like, what's your thought? And realistically, even 3 years ago, because 3 years has passed by, what do you think the plan was at that time?
yeah. I think you got to have options, right?
Yeah.
Even when you have dreams and plans, and you always think you're gonna do something, but then life comes in the way.
Yes.
So we definitely do think about, a newer home,
Sure.
something closer to the Sunnyvale, Menlo area, nicer house if we get more money. That's definitely a goal in mind. So we're definitely trying to save for that.
Yeah.
And then hopefully the property value here goes up. That way
Yep.
you can, make that switch fast. But yeah, I think like an upgrade is definitely in the plans.
Cool.
I don't, if we do move to a new house, it's got to be something that beats this house, right? It's got to
Sure.
be better in terms of commute. It's got to be better in terms of like how new the house is, and it also has to fulfill the basic requirements that we have, like
Right.
the space and
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the home search and as you
mm.
like discover things. What did you feel were like the ups and downs of the journey, if any, if as you remember it 3+ years ago? And is there anything that you feel could have been done differently now that you kind of reminisce 3 years later?
I don't know about differently, but I can talk about the learnings, I guess, from the experience.
Sure.
The time when we were looking for the house, it was, I think the interest rates were low,
Hmm.
and it was definitely a seller's market. People were overbidding and stuff like that. And I remember we had this budget in mind, and I had this fixed number that I would not cross and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And sometimes you got to think about, okay, you have this budget in mind, but based on the interest rate, what might happen in the future, all that other stuff,
Hmm.
you gotta be a little bit flexible. You
Hmm.
gotta be able, you gotta have like options and things that you're gonna willing to give up on and
Hmm.
play with, right? So you gotta play around with. So we had this idea that when we saw this house, we liked it, but we wanted to make a few adjustments. But obviously, my initial offer was not enough for the seller at that time. So in my mind, it's like, okay, we probably need to offer more
Hmm.
and give up on this idea of renovating this particular thing that we wanted to do or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But in hindsight, it was a great decision.
Hmm.
But I think what I and this was obviously after having a lot of conversations with you and talking about how to think about it and stuff like that.
Right.
So you got to have, you know, not everything is going to work out exactly the way you want it.
Yeah.
You may have a plan in place. You may have like something specific you want, but you got to understand what your flexibilities and what you want to play with. I think that was a big learning for me.
I think that's really good, and it's also being humble enough to like admit it, in the sense like we all will come up with a plan, but then the key is whatever your envision is or the model that you have needs to also then connect and match with like the realities of
Yeah.
things. And depending on when you buy, it's also a little bit trickier, right? Like there's sometimes markets may go down, may go sideways, may go up. And if the market is going up, then you have to like reassess those expectations,
Yeah.
because otherwise the market is going up, your expectation stays the same, which means nothing will get done, right? Or it's just very, very difficult for things to get done. So I remember the journey with you, like the kudos is the realization of that. And some people may not change, and that can impact all sorts of price ranges, whether it's $1 million, $3 million. There will all be different circles and areas
Mm-hmm.
that can work, and there will be a lot of areas that just straight up would not work, right? Whether it doesn't meet your own expectations or your budget doesn't meet that area. So to be able to adjust to that is super important, right? And especially in your case, now people don't have the hindsight to do it, but fortunately, when you bought at the 2021 timeframe, like the rate was really low.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, people at that point were also thinking that the rates would be like that number for a while.
Right.
Like there was zero forecasts, zero, that would have said that the rates would be in the sixes,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Like straight up zero. And so you never really know about that on one end. On the other end, it doesn't prevent people from still even buying clearly today.
Yeah.
Right? Like the value of your place right now, even though we're at the end of 2024 and you bought in 2021, even though your rate was probably half of what it is now,
Mm.
the value of this is actually higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, but that's because there's a lot more than just a pure flat number. It's all still relative to how the stock market is doing, which is still doing record numbers. And at the same time, it's all about people's incomes and their ability, right? People may not want to do it, but they are having less chance or less choice. Like you're either going to keep renting at a higher number because
Yeah.
rent has
Rent is
also
really good.
gone up quite a bit, or you're like, all right, time to divest some of it and move in. Right. So I think those are the great things that you kind of discovered on your own. Naturally, obviously, I give you my inputs, but at the end of the day, it's the individual's decision to do that. And because you either make the adjustment and you're successful, and then now we're not even having the discussion for many, many years, or
I just got lucky.
or you get lucky, and the people that are the luckiest are the ones that take action. That's the reality of life too. But it's good for people to kind of see and understand, like, moving from another area, right? Moving from to DC and being here, and you only rented here for
Less than 6 months.
less than 6 months.
Yeah. We got out of the contract because there were some issues with the
Yeah.
property.
So that's a good turnaround. But 6 months is also enough. Like you obviously have been driving to work. You kind of got an idea of the general areas.
Yeah.
So the faster, like in your case, the faster it was to turnaround, the better it ultimately was to not have to be in that like rent column and have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
is there any other final tips? Otherwise, appreciate the time on this.
Yeah, definitely speak to Spencer.
Appreciate it. Oh yeah,
A lot of good advice.
good.
I think we met by fluke, I would say,
Yeah,
but I think having the conversation, learning, asking questions is always important. Even if it's not Spencer or anybody else, but ask the questions, get your information, and then make a decision. And if you're making a decision, you definitely have to think about being flexible and what options you're willing to give up versus uh, you know versus what you want. So yeah, that's about it.
perfect. Well, that's wonderful advice. Appreciate you all for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next video.